Welcome back to Weather This Weekend with Drew Lerner of World Weather. Drew, topsoil moisture. Let's start there. Have we been seeing some improvements in some of those areas that needed it?
Absolutely. A big part of the corn and soybean belt in the U.S. is doing really quite well with moisture. We've got adequate to surplus soil moisture in quite a few areas, but there is a problem out there in that Iowa-Nebraska border area. As you can see, we are obviously lacking significant moisture in the topsoil there. And the concern is that we're going to get a lot hotter over these next few days. In fact, it's already heating up across portions of the plains right now, and that's going to exacerbate that dry bias there. And so there's going to be a little bit of concern about where we're going from here.
Yeah, let's talk about that heat, because I know you are watching this ridge of high pressure. Why is that so important to watch this upcoming week?
Yeah, the ridge of high pressure is very strong. It's a very intensive ridge, and it's likely to continue to dominate a big part of the eastern United States as we go from this weekend on into next week. And its persistence is likely to accelerate drying across many areas. But on this particular graphic, you can see that there's already a frontal system moving through the central part of the United States. And as it comes across the area, it is going to start receiving moisture from the Gulf of Mexico and also from the monsoon pattern in the southwestern United States. There's a nice pocket of cool air coming in behind the low pressure system in the northern plains. And so this is the perfect setup for bringing some significant rain into some of these areas. But with the high pressure ridge being over the eastern Midwest and the Atlantic coast states, we are going to be subjecting ourselves to some excessive heat. And the temperatures today are already up into the 100s across parts of the Dakotas and Nebraska, and that's going to be shifting eastward.
Yeah, let's talk about that. How you mentioned 100. I mean, is that pretty widespread? How high of heat are we talking here?
Yeah, this afternoon, we're going to certainly see temperatures of 100 to 108 from South Dakota down into portions of Nebraska. Some neighboring areas in Colorado and Kansas are going to see some excessive heat as well. And as we move into the day on Sunday, the heat will continue to persist in some of those areas, but starting to mellow out a little bit while we shift the warmest conditions into the Midwest and eventually into the Atlantic coast states. Now, as the heat advances to the east, there's going to be a lot of humidity. You know that the eastern part of the U.S. is always more humid than that in the plains. And so the reason why it's not quite as excessively hot in the Midwest is just simply because of the higher humidity. But when you start pushing temperatures up into the middle and upper 90s on a daily basis, you're going to induce all kinds of stress. And this does continue right into Monday. In fact, the Atlantic coastal region is going to see temperatures over 100 degrees in the Carolinas as well as Virginia. And we're going to see some crazy heat indices taking place, a lot of stress for certainly humans as well as crops and livestock.
Yeah, well, if you were worried about a cool spring that would not budge, that is, I mean, we are drastically moving here. It is officially summer when it comes to the weather. Real quick, last week we were talking about storm clusters. I've heard some concerns about flash drought. Are you worried about either, Drew?
I don't think that we have to worry too much about flash drought right now, but mainly because we still have an awful lot of moisture out there in the soil and on the ground and just about in the atmosphere as well. And, when this high pressure system moves out to the eastern part of the country, there's going to be an influx of moisture coming in from the Gulf of Mexico and the southwestern states, and it is going to generate some rain. And you can see here that the forecast is for some of the areas in the upper Midwest, northern plains will be getting some significant rain above normal amounts in just this next 7-day period. Now, in answer to your question about flash drought, I do think that we need to watch the Tennessee River Basin area and the Ohio River Basin, as well as the southeastern states, because in July and August, both, we are likely to see a steady drying trend in those areas unless a tropical cyclone comes along. And I do think we're going to go from being too wet to too dry.
All right, Drew Lerner, thank you so much for joining us this weekend. Well, the markets are definitely watching the weather, and so we need to talk about that. We'll do that with John Sheave and Brian Grady right after the break.